What if events went differently in Spider-Man 2? What if Spider-Man had chosen a different path while fighting Dr. Octopus at the final battle on the docks? What would have happened if there was 4 alternate scenarios in Spider-Man 2? Some of the scenarios could be good endings. Some of them could take Peter down a dark path. Well, in today's interactive Marvel's What If, you will have the choice to choose between 4 different alternate scenarios. Some very unique universes where some of the events changed slightly different, but just enough to make mega changes within the multiverse. That being said, I do want to say, make sure to support the Patreon, as it's just $1 a month, and it really goes a long way for me to invest in more programs and really upgrade my editing skills and abilities. I cannot thank you enough, and I also do want to say that shirts are on sale right now, so if you want to get your exclusive designs, March is the only month that these will be available, and they're going to be gone, so you're not going to be able to get that second opportunity to get these shirts. There's the Symbiote Sega MCU, and there's also the Spider-Man 4 through 10. So those are all on sale right now. The promo codes are on my social medias on Reddit, Discord, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But that being said, choose your path.
I should have known Osborn wouldn't have the spine to finish you.
Shut it down, Ock. You're gonna hurt a lot more people this time.
Well, that's a risk we're willing to take.
Well, I'm not.
Choice A. Peter kills Otto. The machine was charging up, and Peter knew there wasn't much time left. He had to destroy the machine before it destroyed everything. Otto was determined to use the machine. Although Peter had attempted to speak to the human side of Otto, it was no use. His mind was warped by the voices in his head. Peter's heart burned at the thought of having to stop Otto permanently, but he knew what he had to do. With all of his strength, Peter fought. Otto and Peter clashed again and again until the machine got in the way of their duel. Metal was flying everywhere, slicing up Peter's suit until he was barely recognizable. He was no longer Spider-Man, rather a man going against all odds to stop a madman. After barely managing to save Mary Jane, Peter got back up to fight as metal soared all around them. The fight was becoming more and more dangerous by the second, due to the fact that there were more obstacles to dodge. It got to the point where Peter needed to end Otto. It brought more agony to his chest, but Peter went through with it. With all of his might, he used his webs to grab a piece of sharp metal that was about to fly towards the machine. Instead of letting it get sucked in, he pulled and jumped, guiding it to sink into Otto's chest. The man gasped at the sudden intrusion. He staggered back and slumped to the ground. He was slowly getting dragged towards the machine, the metal in his chest trembling as he tried to pull himself free from Otto's body. Peter went over and kneeled in front of him, attempting to comfort Otto. During his final moments, all Otto said was a mumble about how he was free. He thanked Peter before drifting off into the darkness. Peter's eyes clogged with tears as he watched the light leave Otto's face. However, there was still much to do. Peter needed to shut the machine down before it destroyed New York. With his webs, he tried his best to jam the machinery. None of that worked. Peter scrambled to think of the ideas to stop it, but it didn't seem as though there were any options at his disposal. Right when he was about to start throwing random objects at it to see if that would help, Mary Jane ran back to him and pointed to the water, suggesting he drown it in there. Parker thanked her for this suggestion, commanding her to run so she wouldn't get caught in the crossfire. MJ agreed, rushing away and wishing Peter luck. Peter attached webs to the bottom of the machine, preparing to push it out of the area. However, there was only one issue. The machine was giant and heavy. There was no way he could push it into the water. That left one more option. He had to destroy the rest of the building. Unsure of how to do that, Peter got to work with knocking down all of the objects in the area. The concrete beneath him was still solid, meaning he had to smash something into it if he wanted to crack it. Peter glanced around and all he saw was metal rushing towards him. That was it. That was his plan. As soon as a large chunk of metal flew by, Peter grabbed onto it with a bunch of webs and directed the momentum towards the ground. Since it was going so fast, the metal hit the floor with a loud thud that shocked the terrain. Peter almost fell, but he was pleased to see a crack that was forming. Another chunk of metal came by, and Peter repeated the action. He did it again and again until the floor snapped, the building tearing itself apart thanks to the lack of foundation. The machine dove into the water, and Spider-Man was swinging himself out of there before the entire place collapsed. Peter found MJ not too far away, and together they watched as the machine got drowned into the water. The glowing light slowly faded from their vision, and Peter winced when he saw Otto's body sinking with it. The adrenaline from the fight wore off, and Peter broke down. He regretted breaking down in front of her, but it was impossible to hold back his guilt any longer. He had killed Otto, and it broke his heart to think about that. MJ held him while he cried and pleaded with her, telling her he didn't mean to, he didn't want to. MJ shushed him and said it was okay, but Peter didn't believe her. None of it was okay. He had hurt someone he cared about. No, beyond that, he killed somebody he cared about. There was no turning back from that. MJ took Peter home, but there was no stopping him from spiraling into a fit of grief and depression. Peter blamed himself, and there was no one who could bring him out of it except him. Peter didn't even want to be Spider-Man anymore. He thought he'd harm more, kill more. It wasn't the first time that this had already happened. Something like this had already happened with Norman Osborn, and it was a terrifying thought that made his blood boil and his heart crack. It took days for Peter to find the strength to become Spider-Man again. It took days for him to have the courage to put on the suit. Even when he put it on, he didn't feel the same. He stopped a thief from robbing a grocery store at gunpoint. Otherwise, Peter didn't do much as Spider-Man. The public missed him. MJ missed him too. Peter missed himself, but he wasn't sure how to return to his old state. A month after the incident, the public began to worry about Spider-Man and organized a demonstration. Peter sat on the rooftops and watched as the people marched down the streets, doing a makeshift parade for the lost superhero. It was that brought him back. It brought Peter's spirit. Although he despised himself for what he had done, he knew he had to put it aside to protect the people. Slowly but surely, Peter became Spider-Man again. He refused to kill, even if it seemed necessary. Instead, he tied down any criminals that came in his path. He would never forget Dr. Octavius, but he knew he had to keep moving forward. Although it was a hard and unforgiving path, Peter Parker pushed through it. He had the power to save people, and that was exactly what Peter did. Choice B. MJ gets killed. As Peter was engaged in combat with Otto Octavius, MJ was in danger. Peter was in a dance. He was going back and forth between fighting Otto and fighting to save his love. It was impossible to keep up with, especially since the machine was screwing with his spider sense. He was suffering from sensory overload, all the hairs on his body shouting straight up and alerting him about the danger coming from all directions. Peter trusted only his gut as he fought. The arms had kept striking him, Peter doing all he could to avoid contact. However, what he didn't realize was that debris was falling from the building, about to land on Mary Jane. His spider sense was all over the place. The debris was only another alert in a sea of danger. By the time Peter realized it was a real threat, it was already too late. He whipped around and saw MJ screaming. He could hear the sound piercing his ears, even over the strong noises the machine was producing. Peter shouted, leaping towards her. He reached out with his web. The webbed hand went to take her, to save her from the debris. It didn't work. The debris fell and crushed her anyway. Peter's lungs burned from the noises that scratched their way out of his throat. Her hand fell to the ground as a scarlet shade of moisture dripped across the pavement before him. Her fingers twitched. They rose, fell, rose, then fell for a final time. No movement came to the rest of her deflated body. MJ was a hollow shell of what she used to be, and Peter's eyes shrunk inside their sockets to avoid viewing the sight. Rage ignited in himself, inside of his bones, flying out of his body in a series of battle cries. He didn't hold back any longer. Sparks flew as he soared over Otto, using every move he had practiced to combat the mechanical man. Otto fought back, but it was no use. Peter was victorious. He threw everything he knew at the man. Less than a minute later, Peter had pinned Otto to the ground, and he was punching him over and over again. Peter didn't stop until Otto was unresponsive, with an oozing, sticky liquid slithering its way down the cracks and tears in Spider-Man's suit. Peter's fist remained in the air for perhaps too long. He was panting, his figure trembling as he realized what he had done. By the time he put his fingers on Otto's neck, it was too late. The man was gone. No pulse beat under Peter's touch. Spider-Man slumped to the ground as the metal formed a storm behind him. Parts of the building, scuffling, and maybe even cars made their way towards the machine, not far from him. Peter couldn't bring himself to pay attention. MJ was under a pile of debris a few feet away, and a man Peter murdered in cold blood was right next to him. The fate of New York City was in Spider-Man's hands, but all he could do was stare at what he had caused. MJ and Otto were leaking blood. The machine was active and whirling, pounding against Peter's eardrums. All the hairs on his arms stood up, rubbing against what little fabric was left of his suit. What did he do? How could he help New York now? He stared at the destruction he caused by giving in to his rage. Otto was slumped over, not so much as twitching. Peter tore his eyes away. Although MJ was gone and Otto was killed by Peter, there was still a chance to save New York. Peter wouldn't let that chance go to waste. He somehow managed to get to his feet and wobbled over to the machine. He had no idea how to stop it. There were no obvious switches or levers that would stop the wrath of the weapon. Peter tried everything he could, from smashing items into the side of it to webbing the gears. There was nothing that was working. Peter still didn't give up. MJ wouldn't approve of him giving up at this moment, so he pushed forward. Peter got back up after the metal smashed into him, until the metal smashed into him and tore him down. He kept fighting to tear the machine apart, piece by piece. Yet somehow, nothing worked. There really was no way to stop the machine. Peter didn't die sitting down. He didn't want to. He kept tearing apart the plating surrounding the machine, but he ended up getting hit by a piece of metal and thrown inside. Just like that, Spider-Man fell. The neighborhood hero was killed, as well as the rest of New York. New York fell, and the machine became unstable from how much it had handled. The amount of metal it was swallowing overwhelmed it until it exploded, creating radiation. Anyone within 2 miles of the explosion suffered from radiation poisoning. And New York was considered an off-limits state. No one could help it. It was gone. Spider-Man was dead, as were any threats in New York City, not that it mattered. New York was destroyed with no hope of ever coming back. The government shut it down and refused to let anyone go back inside the city. They said that they were sending rescue teams in to save whoever was left. They lied. Peter died with MJ and Otto. All of New York died with them. It was a bittersweet goodbye, resulting in the death of New York. A death that would not soon be forgotten. Choice C. The machine destroys New York. As the machine whirled, Peter tried his best to stop it. He was ducking and diving all over the place, attempting to dodge what he could and save MJ at the same time. He had too much going all at once. There was no way he could keep track of it and save everyone. Peter was just one man going up against a freak of nature with arms that could crush his spine. Otto went to grab Peter, but he dodged at the last second. He pleaded with Otto as much as he could. Nothing worked. No appeal to Otto's humanity worked. It slowed the man down. But not for long. Not long for the machine to turn off, or be damaged by all the metal flying through it. More and more of the city was getting torn up by the machinery. Peter webbed Otto as best he could to a nearby wall, doing a series of flips to get the machine and break off multiple parts from it. Peter resorted to tearing off everything he could. He clogged the gears with his webs. He pulled plugs. He tore off plating from the other side. Nothing worked. Peter almost screamed from the lack of success. His day only got more complicated when Otto came up behind him and threw him away from the machine. Peter grunted as he fell on his back, not having enough time to react to Otto's next move. Otto grabbed him with one of his arms, the claws wrapping around Peter's neck. At the same time, MJ was in danger. She was sliding towards the machine, threatening to get launched into it. Peter choked and saw stars, glancing around to see what he could. With his webs, he grabbed a slab of concrete that was pulled up from the floor. Then, he smashed it off of the back of Otto, rendering him unconscious. Parker fell to the floor, but he had no time to recover from getting choked. Instead, he hopped up, shooting up more webs to slow down Mary Jane's fall towards the machine. Peter sprinted, barely managing to save her in time. The only issue was the machine. New York City was getting torn up more and more by the second. Streetlights were creating a tornado in the air as they flew toward the mouth of the machine. Even people were getting dragged into the water. Same with cars and benches with metal bottoms. Right when Peter went to go stop the machine, a piece of metal soared and smashed against the back of his head. It sent Peter flying to the ground, unconscious. MJ couldn't do anything but watch, begging him to wake up. Otto didn't let up. When he woke up, he stood by the machine and watched as it sucked everything in around it. New York was slowly getting destroyed. More metal slid towards the reactor, the light absorbing anything that came near it. Otto was mesmerized by it, smiling through it all. MJ tried running, but Otto forced her to stay. He pinned her down with one of his arms and made her watch as the world she knew fell apart. Peter didn't wake up in time to stop the chaos. It got to the point where cars were getting sucked in. Cars with people in them. Families. Children. All Mary Jane could do was scream as she watched the people die, as she watched New York die. New York was sucked into an oblivion. MJ and Peter ended up being part of it. They both fell into the machine, thanks to how much it absorbed. Even Otto was killed by his own creation. Soon enough, New York was getting wiped off the face of the earth. Skyscrapers were getting torn down. The people ran for their lives, but it didn't save them. Buildings collapsed on top of them, broken glass impaling those who stood even a beat too long. In a matter of minutes, New York was destroyed. Even if there were survivors, they were stuck underneath the debris or too injured to move. The government acted quickly as they could, but getting close proved difficult. Helicopters were taken in seconds. Long-range arsenals were their next best option. They decided to bomb the machine, hoping that it would put an end to it. They sent it as far away as possible, the ASMN hitting its target before it got destroyed by the machine. The machine got sucked into the water, the power extinguished. The threat was over, but New York was already gone. All around the United States, the loss of New York was felt. Inflation rose almost immediately, and the amount of lives lost was monumental. Recovering was nearly impossible. The economy took a nosedive, and without Spider-Man, supervillains ran all over the deserted streets of New York and took what was left. Because it was a wasteland, the government shutting down the borders and not allowing anyone inside the state. They turned it into a prison-like area, fencing the entire state off and leaving guards everywhere they could. Rescue teams went in to go and save who was left, but many of them didn't want to leave after a certain amount of time. They liked living in the ruins and sourcing for resources. Anyone inside New York was considered trespassing, but the citizens had to figure out how to avoid the authorities by that point, especially the villains who became leaders in what they called the Pit. All the authorities could do was watch as the supervillains grew in power, and planned to expand their empire into other states. New York was only the beginning. It was the breeding ground for new villains to rise in the wake of Spider-Man's demise. The rest of America, and possibly the world, was at stake. It was only a matter of time. Choice D. Otto lives. Peter managed to talk Otto into taking down the machine. Although Otto took much convincing, Peter's plan worked. Now Otto was back and being on Peter's side. There was sympathy flashing in the older man's eyes, him regretting all he had done up to that point. Peter helped him, pleading with Otto that they could make it right. Peter was pleasantly surprised when Otto agreed and brainstormed ways to destroy the machine. Since there was no way to shut it down, the next step was trying to get rid of it. Otto lit up, Peter preparing to aid him when Otto forced him back. Otto was going to sink the machine into the water, but he needed to do it alone. He didn't want to risk Peter getting caught up in the fury of the storm. Although resistant, Peter agreed to let Otto do what he needed to. With MJ, he fled the scene and got her to safety. Meanwhile, Otto sank the machine under the water, using all of his might. As he sank towards the pit of the ocean, he accepted his fate, shutting his eyes to meet whatever scientific discovery would come next. However, the end never came. Otto felt something attached to his chest, and suddenly, he was skyrocketed away from the deadly machine below him. It was a struggle, but Otto was pulled to the surface. He coughed and gagged, spitting out the water that was clogging his lungs. His vision was blurry, his senses dull. As he tried to figure out what happened, he felt himself getting dragged away on an island, maybe wood. It felt as though wood was underneath him as he was brought to another land. After a few moments, Otto opened his eyes and he was met with the face of Peter Parker, who gave Otto a soft smile and insisted that he couldn't let him die. It wasn't the right thing to do. Not when Otto had sacrificed so much. It was a selfless yet foolish decision. Otto knew he was better off getting sucked into the void, but he thanked Peter regardless. The main issue was a plan. Otto was a criminal and he would gladly face justice for it. But how? He had arms attached to his body that would make him a threat to anyone. He terrified the people thanks to his intimidating appearance. He stood no chance in court. There was no realistic way Otto could go out in the public ever again, even if he somehow walked free from punishment. Peter decided to hide Otto for the time being. Peter planned to create a cure for Otto, something to stop his arms from controlling him or tempting him to go insane again. Peter worked long days and nights to find a solution, only for little to no progress. Meanwhile, Otto was on the verge of being found. He hid near the outskirts of the city, staying in abandoned areas and moving between them, as not to stay in one place for too long. However, he was running out of time. After the ordeal with the machine, Otto was a wanted man. They never found his body and were searching as hard as they could. Eventually, Peter found a way to help Otto, giving him the cure. He was pleased when Otto expressed his gratitude. Otto could think again. There was no voices in his mind telling him what to do or tempting him to turn sides. Otto finally didn't have to fight for his own sanity at every turn. Peter and Otto sat down to discuss a plan, and Otto wanted to turn himself in before anything got worse. It was only a matter of time before he got caught. The last thing he wanted was making his image worse by continuing to run. Peter agreed with Otto's idea, but Otto didn't want Peter connected to this in any way. Otto made sure Peter didn't come with him to the station, and he agreed. Otto turned himself in and he was immediately placed in custody. He claimed he wasn't a threat as he designed a new way to keep his arms his, not an enemy. The police didn't believe him and kept him in a special chamber that could hold him better. He was transferred with chains forcing his arms together. They were clamped together, no way for Otto to break out. From there, Otto was charged with a long list of crimes he knew he would be found guilty of. Soon enough, he went to court, and the people demanded justice. So many had lost valuables like cars and parts of their homes. Some even died in the commotion. they were crushed by cars or fell to their deaths. Peter went to the trial despite how Otto didn't want him involved in the case. He hoped Otto would be given some form of mercy, but it wasn't much of a surprise when he was sentenced to life in prison. Otto was taken away to start his sentence, and Peter went home since there was nothing more he could do. At the very least, Otto was safe from himself. Peter was sure Otto would get a special cell built for him, special guards, a special schedule, special everything. Peter feared for the man, but Mary Jane reassured him that Otto turned himself in and accepted the consequences of his actions. It didn't sit well with Peter. He didn't think Otto was a bad man by any means, rather a misguided one who made a mistake. Peter wished there was more he could do, or a way he could go back in time and save Doc from the madness. Peter accepted his defeat and took time to reflect on what happened. The machine was destroyed, but did Peter make a mistake? Should he have let Otto die in the water? Peter blamed himself for causing Otto to go to prison for the rest of his life. But Otto wasn't mad at him. Or was he? Despite his better judgment, Peter went to visit Otto. It was a brief visit due to how dangerous Otto was, but he was allowed in for 5 minutes. He spoke with Octavius through reinforced glass, and Otto reassured Peter that it wasn't his fault. None of it was. Although Peter still blamed himself, he accepted the answer. Otto told him he'd be okay. Prison. Otto was at peace to think without causing any harm. He was free. Now, Peter had to accept that. Now that is going to be What If Spider-Man 2, the interactive Marvel's What If. What did you think of this interactive What If? I know that 3 of the endings seem to be a little bit darker, but Choice D, if you ended up choosing Choice D, it was a very different ending. I think it was a more realistic ending, and it was definitely a good light side ending. I think it was. Honestly, I really loved doing this. All of the stories were fantastic. Each ending had a flavor to it. It had something brand new that Spider-Man 2 I don't think ever had, or I don't think anybody would have ever considered, especially how deadly the machine could have been. I think it could have wiped out New York City entirely, or even the entire world. So what did you think about it? Did you enjoy the Marvel's What If? And if you did, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. Have you been seeing the latest Instagram posts? I do want to say, make sure to follow my Instagram, as a lot of your requests in the comments down below, they're going to be turned into reels. So you're going to see community shoutouts, you're going to see a ton of things. So I do want to say, if you haven't already followed me on Instagram, I would highly suggest that you do it right now. I also do want to say, make sure to check out the merch shop, as there's only limited edition t-shirts, and the quantity, it's unlimited, but it's only for the month of March, so you have to get it right away. But that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a phenomenal day, and I'll see you in the next fan fiction. I can't wait to do more. There's going to be a ton more fan requests, a lot more stuff happening, especially on the Patreon. But anyways, as always, thank you again, and peace out.